Good morning and welcome. It's Friday morning here on OTBAM. Delighted to have you with us this morning. Keep your comments coming into us between now and 9 o'clock. We've got a packed show for you. We're going to let you know what's going to across the back pages very shortly. As always, I'm joined in studio by Owen Shane. Very good morning to you, Owen.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. Pretty cold outside, a little bit snowy.
Yeah.
Expecting pretty cold conditions over the weekend.
It's just kind of like
the weather update.
The god of sport saying the Winter Olympics is here.
Absolutely. You
have some of that fresh powder, I think they call it.
You could do a luge down the main street in Inniskeen over the weekend, as it turns out.
Does Inniskeen have a main street?
Apparently, it's got one pub.
Does it have A Street?
We've established in the last 5 minutes that you're off to Inniskeen for the weekend.
I am.
Grand Tour, yourself and maybe about 100 other Kerry fans who go to all of these league matches. They don't just turn up sort of in the first weekend of September, whatever it is now, to get to the All-Ireland final. I mean, not always, obviously, in recent years. But you're a bit of a diehard. You're on tour again.
I wouldn't say, like, I don't like to kind of give that line diehard, because when you're from Kerry but based in Dublin, it is much easier to get to the away games. Like,
so is this a new thing, or is this... been doing it?
No, I would have always been fairly good. I'm certainly a lot better since I've been living in Dublin, because Inniskeen is only an hour up the road, whereas for people from the southwest, you're talking 4.5 hours minimum to get there. So, I'm being modest about my.
Can I just ask you, on that basis, what would you describe as a diehard?
Well, I guess.
I mean, do you have to be Peg Sayer out in the Blasket Islands, making the full effort to get to Inniskeen to be properly considered?
You need to get 2 modes of transport, a boat and a car. That's when you're a proper diehard. But I'm close enough. I'm as close as I ever want to be.
To Kerry? No,
to being a diehard.
Right,
I don't want to go full diehard.
So you've been on tour over the last few weeks and taken in a few of the various games and been very tame in terms of your...
Are we having this conversation again? This thing came up with Ger earlier in the week. That
what was it about? I didn't see it.
He kind of painted our travelling cohort as a bunch of animals. That
it doesn't. Like I've been hearing from various sources that isn't entirely inaccurate. That there's a lot of one-way traffic that's directed at players across some of the teams that you've been to see. Not really. Opposition teams.
This has been painted as some sort of like Fawcett Circus situation where we go touring around and we break out these animals that we are, supposedly.
Kerry animals, yeah.
Well, clearly the greatest of them all, Paddy O'Shea described us as such, so fair enough, but that's complete nonsense, to be quite honest with you.
So it's all very tame and sort of...
very tame.
Good on you, Aidan O'Shea. That was a great play. We wish you've got a great surname. We wish you were one of ours. That sort of thing. Is that?
Well, Aidan O'Shea's got great Kerry heritage. Someone said that's the reason why he's so good. Yeah. And the reason why I'm certainly on the Aidan O'Shea bandwagon is because he is so good, and I think he gets a very hard time. And from Kerry fans, of course, he got quite a hard time last week. But I think
not from your specific group, though.
Not from me.
Definitely nothing. Not from your group. What was the question?
I don't like to speak on behalf of other individuals. All I like to.
I'm taking that as some sort of disgraceful behaviour, is what it sounds like to me.
Well, somebody came over to us after the game and said we were behaving disgracefully, which I thought was a disgraceful thing in itself to say, given what we heard around us from the Mayo. But I don't want to get into this again, because generally, I found myself generalising quite a lot when it comes to the Mayo fans, just based on my sampling of one section of the crowd, which is an awful thing to do. Just like you're generalising Kerry fans, and Ger was generalising Kerry fans as a result of maybe our behaviour last week.
No, based on some evidence, I suppose, is the kind of key to that.
It is a generalisation, though. But yeah, looking forward to Inniskeen, looking forward to going to the home of Patrick Kavanagh. I might pop into the museum. If anybody's got any good tips for Inniskeen, let me know.
Very good.
I think there is one pub. If you could let me know the name of that pub, that would be great.
And if you see Owen out and about in Inniskeen or anywhere else over the weekend, do feel free to come over and berate him for his own beration of the Monaghan players not out at the weekend.
No, I will be very respectful. As long as Kerry have a comfortable 6 to 7 point lead throughout the match, then I won't get angry.
That's what you're looking forward to most, I expect, then, over the weekend. The Italy game is kind of a bit of a
I think
by for you.
Not at all. Tomorrow's a fantastic day of sport.
Yeah.
With Arsenal Spurs kicking things off, of course, the Six Nations. England-Wales is going to be massive after the obvious note of Ireland-Italy. There's one actually on, not sure if I'll be home in time for it, but Sunday night, you've got Cavs versus Celtics in the NBA as well at 8 o'clock Irish time. It's very rare that you get good basketball at a good Irish time, so that'll be good. You've also got the Winter Olympics throughout the weekends. I'm a big snowboarding fan, especially in the BBC.
All right.
Their commentators are amazing. There's nothing better than a commentator who truly believes that what they're witnessing is the best theatre that they could possibly witness. And of course, they've found experts in all these areas, as you naturally do when you're setting up a broadcast. And they're so into it. And I get so into it because of these commentators. And they're absolutely fantastic. I don't for 1 second remember their names from 4 years ago, but I hope that they've got the same guys on board because, pardon the pun, because I want to watch snowboarding in the company of these commentators because they were so bloody good last time.
The fact that you even remember that the commentary team from, I can't remember Sochi, a jot of the brilliantly organised Winter Olympics last time around. Some of the best games I've ever seen. That I can't remember a jot of what happened. You can remember the specifics of the commentators. I'm all for that. So look at good weekend. But if you do see Owen out and about, do feel free to give him a little bit of stick. I think that's...
thanks for speaking on my behalf there.
Yeah. Coming up over the next hour and a little bit, a busy show for you, a packed show, and a couple of great guests to get to as well. We're going to talk about the back pages very shortly. As Owen said, it's a huge weekend in rugby, and that England-Wales game, we've had a lot of conversation about Ireland-Italy this week, and there's a lot of really good stuff up on offtheball.com, so go along and check that there. But we did want to take the time to talk about a couple of our opponents that will be upcoming, including England and Wales. I'm going to do that in the company of an absolute legend, Shane Williams. That's coming your way in around 15 minutes or thereabouts. We are also going to talk about Ireland-Italy. We're going to delve into some of those stories inside the back pages this morning. We're going to talk Friday football. Kevin Kilbane is along. We might even get a bit of GAA out of him because he too is on his travels this weekend. He's off to Salt Hill to take in, I think, it's probably the game of the weekend in Division 1. It's Galway up against Mayo. And it's back, folks. It's back. It's been a full 7 days, but the barometer is back. So we'll run you through the reverse order of 5 through to 1 of what I think this week is really good reasons to be a sports fan. All of that good stuff upcoming. We're going to kick off with the newspapers though. Owen's going to start us with the Indo.
Joe Schmidt, big score, just the Italian job, reads the headline on the Irish Independent. Coach wants Ireland to hit heights of last year's 9-try win when they take on O'Shea's side. Of course, there's plenty of Ireland-Italy coverage across the back pages, but before we move on to the Irish Times, it's worth pointing out Colin Keys' story here in the back of the Irish Independent. Hanley set for Mayo return as Armagh ace Clark opts for New York. So that is Jamie Clark and that is Cian Hanley going to New York and to Mayo respectively. That is huge news from a Mayo perspective. Particularly, you might feel that they're one forward short of winning in All-Ireland. It seems like we've been saying that for 5 to 10 years to this point. But Cian Hanley with his physicality, we all know what Ty Connelly brought to Kerry. And, you know, given the tone of this show throughout the last 5 days, and if the Mayo cohort who have really honestly believed that Kerry kind of out-cynicked them last week, then Cian Hanley, somebody with the old AFL kind of...
hashtag fake news on by the sounds of your comment there.
Well, yeah, but we saw what Ty Connelly brought in terms of grit. And
you'd hope that he's more Ty Connelly than Tommy Walsh, obviously. That's the...
Well, that's
true. The hope here.
Yeah, I suppose he's got youth on his side, but Tommy Walsh was that. Tommy Walsh was much younger when he came back.
Couldn't get the skill set, I think. Was that the...
just fitness. Tommy Walsh got a horrible injury in Australia.
Hamstring off the bone stuff, was it?
As far as I know, though, Hanley hasn't had a horrible injury, which means his physicality is obviously going to be amazing. And just as long as he picks up the skill set, which he should do, he's an All-Ireland under-21 winner, or minor winner, for Mayo. So that's a huge addition, and I'm sure Colin Keys has good sources there. Jamie Clark to New York is going to be a very interesting element as well. But anyway, back to the rugby on Sports Friday in the Irish Times. Desire for tries acute, but Schmidt knows patience may be required. While on the front of the Irish Examiner sports section, they are going with Conor O'Shea. Keeping it real, reads the headline. I'll be judged on it. People will be sick of me talking performances and they'll turf me out. Fine, not a problem. So Conor O'Shea just wants to be judged on his merits. And Ronan O'Gara's column there, small margins. The winning inches are getting even smaller, says Rog. On the front of the Heralds, they go with Ireland's fresh coat of Larmour, which is a good headline. Irish coach Schmidt lauds dynamic fullback and believes his latest recruit has the talent to do whatever is required ahead of likely debut against Italy. While on the back of the Times Ireland edition, they're going with the Jack Conan angle. Conan can stake a claim against Italy, says Gary Doyle's headline there. He is pictured on the back page there. While on the back of the Irish Daily Mail, ready to put on a show, Ireland will entertain against Italy, says Schmidt.
Good stuff. That's the rugby, and it's not to say it doesn't appear in some of the other papers too, because it does. The back page of the Irish Daily Star this morning. They never believed in Wes. Giles slams Irish bosses for Hoolahan treatment. That's a piece built around John's appearance on Off the Ball last night. Some other stuff there, including the rugby, but an interesting line here too about John O'Shea is ready to retire, according to Paul Lennon. Here, might not be all that surprising, he's 37. In a couple of months' time, we'll get Kevin Kilbane's thoughts on that a little bit later. Masters of diving, Arsene Wenger claims the English are the experts. So stoking it up nicely ahead of the North London Derby this weekend, and O'Neill Hale's Hools, as he calls it a day there. That's the Irish Mirror this morning. On the back page of the Irish Sun, it's J-Rod racism charge. Star will fight FA rap after bong incident. J. Rodriguez claiming his innocence. The FA have charged him. That case will play out over the next few days, I'm sure. Wes retires, also reflected upon there. In the Racing Post this morning, victory for Lawler would be all for Richard. Ahead of the weekend's racing there, and some football as well on the back. That's the Racing Post this morning. In the Daily Telegraph, dirty tricks. This is a really interesting story that we'll get into with Shane Williams very shortly. It's Eddie Jones showing his true colours here ahead of the England-Wales game at the weekend, having a proper pop off the Wales captain Alan Wynne-Jones, and having a proper pop off the rookie standoff Rhys Patchell, 24-year-old Rhys Patchell, who's the out half for Wales this weekend. A young guy cutting his way in the game, and Eddie Jones thinks it's a fair game to have a good pop off him, and so he does. Back page of The Guardian, finally this morning, it's a bit of a hodgepodge of lots of stories here, including Eddie Jones takes a swipe at Wales over conduct of captain and podium power. Team GB targets best to ever return as Winter Olympics begin in Pyeongchang. So that's pretty much what's going on across the back pages this morning. On a few stories in there that we wanted to get to as well, just to give you a bit of a flavour of stuff that was that got our interest this morning, including some of the following. There's some GAA declaration of salaries. Sean Moran has it in the Irish Times this morning. Jeremy Corbyn on the racism issue. John O'Shea possibly retiring. And that Rhys Patchell story as well. So you might kick us off with the Rhys Patchell story.
Yeah, let's go for it. It's in the Daily Telegraph today. It's interesting stuff. Well, first of all, this story kind of piqued my interest because Eddie Jones is 10 out of 10 box office, absolutely making the Six Nations what it is these days. The media war is what you want. We used to get it with Warren Gatland. Gatland has kind of mellowed out a little bit. He's not as likely to give us some dynamite. He might do it ahead of the Ireland game, and we hope we do. But I think in the fallow years of the media wars, when I suppose Gatland started to mellow out and before Jones came in, we were crying out for this.
Before Gatland started to mellow out?
Yeah, like I think, do you not agree that Gatland's a lot mellower now than he was 10 years ago?
I think that there's a very good reason that Warren Gatland hasn't appeared in front of the media this week.
Well, because
he hasn't mellowed out, and that Robin McBride was put up. I think he's the forwards coach, and I have some idea that the Eddie Jones comments, I mean these incendiary comments I would describe them, were delivered before the Welsh press conference. So Robin McBride is a much calmer, mellow, I would say, personality, and so he just kind of bats them away in a, look, Rhys Patchell's our guy, we love him, we think he's great, like he's the only guy in town, obviously is the other sort of context. That I just think that putting Warren Gatland up results in a Eddie Jones is a bleep, 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 and another thing.
You really think so?
Yeah, I do, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I'm not sure if I agree with that. I think if you go back 5 years, like, it's just like lighting a stick of dynamite, as I said. Now I think the Sean O'Brien thing is actually a great example, because Gatland had many an opportunity to go absolutely ballistic after that, but maybe what he said was actually the true feeling, you know, that he has so much respect for Sean O'Brien that he wasn't going to burst into a ball of fury, and that kind of, it was a calculated response to O'Brien, wasn't it?
Well, you see, there's certainly an element of that, right? And I would say that, like, we had him over at a roadshow here in Dublin in November, I'm going to say, and like, you know, a lovely fella, very good to deal with and lead into it, like no sort of element of drama or prima donna, which you can definitely get with guests at time. Very good guy to deal with, I have to say, on that front. We didn't have any amazing conversations sort of pre the show about what the topic or the agenda of the night was going to be. And the Sean O'Brien stuff comes up, obviously, and he makes the point at that stage that, you know, well, Sean O'Brien would want to look at his record. Again, like, before you're shooting off against New Zealand, you want to look at your record. Like, that was a pretty pointed thing. I think that he fights against himself to try and be that mellow guy who isn't all the time sort of going over the top of the hedge with...
I think he's won that fight.
See, and I don't think he did, because I think that comment about O'Brien sort of betrayed that a little bit. And also, he went headlong into the Eddie O'Sullivan stuff, which is old news in a fairly significant way. But again, the question comes up, and he just couldn't help himself. I think he's constantly fighting against that, if I'm being honest. So, well, he may have mellowed a bit, but I think the urge is still there to give it both barrels when the opportunity arises.
My point anyway is that we should all be thankful that we've got Eddie Jones, because he is adding fuel to this already amazing fire that is the Six Nations. Like, there is always good stuff in the media, there is always great games, it is the greatest rugby competition around, and then Eddie Jones just makes it even better, because we have this innate hatred for the man now because of the stuff he says, because of those Sexton comments a couple of years ago, and now the Welsh hate him probably even more than we hated him.
For somebody with a surname like that, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is truly remarkable. So he's having a go at Rhys Patchell, and that really got at me. First of all, I'm like, leave the gingers alone. Don't you dare go at Rhys Patchell. The stuff he said, if you did miss it, about Rhys Patchell, was that the way in which Owen Farrell and Chris Robshaw are going to be running at him, it's going to be one hell of an experience for the kid. When it gets a bit cut and thrust, nip and tuck, this will be a proper test match. Then we will see if he has the bottle to handle it. So he's brought Jonathan Joseph back into the team as well. So there's probably going to be a lot of arrows directed towards Rhys Patchell, and there's an exclusive interview with him here in the Telegraph with James Corrigan. And he refers to an old quote that Patchell himself gave, where he was reminded that he once referred to his looks as half Ron Weasley and half Prince Harry. And then in this interview he says, "I was young and trying to be funny, but I'm neither, am I? I mean, one's a wizard and the other's a prince." And I think that kind of perfectly sums up Patchell's modesty. Of course, this interview would have happened before the Gatland quotes, because he's not asked about it at all. But I think, or sorry, not the Gatland quotes, Jones quotes. And when you read this, you start to feel really sorry for the guy, because he really is a guy who is very modest. He keeps himself in check. He knows that he's a third choice out half, as he points out in this interview. And Eddie Jones has seen a weakness in that and gone right after it, which is like a lion gobbling up a poor beaver in the desert, or something that you'd see on planet Earth. There was no beavers in the desert. What the hell am I talking about? But anyway, it is like
Groundhog Day.
It's like a poor kind of animal getting gobbled up in planet Earth too, as we witnessed. And Jones just saw Patchell with his kind of modesty and was like, "I'm going to pick on you. I think that you're not good enough to handle the white heat of Twickenham." And he's gone right after him. Like, some of the other stuff that we've seen though in this Patchell interview is actually quite interesting. He said that he was in the Cardiff Blues Academy. He wasn't getting picked, so he wanted to go and become a PE teacher. So the school he was in had links with Canada, and his plan was to go pack his bags and feck off to Canada for a while, basically, and suss things out. He was actually going to link up with the Canadian national team, because that would be the highest level of rugby he could play. And of course, with the 3-year rules and stuff, he could have one day been wearing a red jersey for a national team, but for Canada. And he says there was kind of a last-minute thing when he was doing his A-levels, where he was brought back into the Blues to do some pre-season training, and things went from there. It didn't exactly take off for him straight away. 2015-2016 season, working with the Scarlets, wasn't getting picked for the summer tour to New Zealand with Wales, was about to tee off on a golf course, then gets the call off the Wales management saying, "Come on, get on the next plane, come down under," starts 2 of the tests against Wales, and has kind of been a mainstay since within the squad. But then, of course, you look at Biggar and Priestland, and the fact that he has now been in this situation where he is the starting 10 for Wales.
Well, you just hope for his sake that, like, this great feature piece in the paper this morning, and obviously starting in all these Six Nations games and doing very well against Scotland as well, it has to be said, for a guy of his experience and his age and all that sort of stuff, that, like, this isn't the peak of things. When they come back, that he gets shunted off the scene again. We shall see. On the Eddie Jones stuff, I don't know, I just thought that his bullshit is everything I hate about sport. Like, it's contrived nonsense. Like, it's Jose Mourinho levels of absolute nonsense. It's very specific stuff to say about Rhys Patchell, about, well, you know, when the shit hits the fan, his teammates are going to be looking at him going, "This is an inexperienced guy who isn't really fully sure what he's doing," and they're going to doubt him. It's like, what he's trying to do is plant seeds of doubt in Rhys Patchell's mind about, you know, as he says himself, when Joseph is barreling down that channel and he's all up in his grill, you know, that he's beginning to doubt himself. And I understand this is what happens in sport. It's like, I'm going to say these things that ultimately, as a coach or management or whatever, to try and have some sort of an impact on the opposition. It's just contrived bullshit.
Well, Austin Healy reckons it's going to work. He says that will Patchell tighten his game and try to take fewer risks, or does he become emboldened and throw even wilder passes? Either way, this will play into England's hands.
Maybe he just goes and has to get, like, it doesn't have to be either of those options. maybe he just goes and has the game he was always going to have. Maybe he just, hopefully, but like, I'm sort of, who wins between England and Wales, 50-50, couldn't really care less. I read those quotes and I'm hoping this guy has a winning drop goal from 42 yards out in the 3rd minute of added time at the end of the game to win it for Wales. And I want to see Eddie Jones' face at that stage.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes it great. That gives you investment in this that you wouldn't ordinarily have.
That's not what he's trying to do, though. And
it doesn't matter what his intentions are. His intentions may be grim. I'm saying from a neutral perspective, Eddie Jones is complete and utter box office, and we should be lucky to have him. We should be happy to have him.
You're trying to ride me now.
All hail at the altar of Eddie Jones. Ride me now.
This is more of your the Kerry animal coming out in you.
Wow.
Is that it? That's you on the Patchell stuff. Some of the other stuff we wanted to touch on, the GAA defending policy of not releasing top salaries. This is Sean Moran in the Irish Times this morning. So they defended their policy in relation to the inclusion of top salaries in the annual accounts. So essentially they're saying that the top people in the GAA are volunteers, so they shouldn't have to release their salaries is the point here. And obviously the accounts that come in from the GAA year after year are showing increased profit, and that's great, and they shouldn't apologise for any of that, as a point was made during the week, I think, that because there was, I think it was 55 million the previous year that Central Council had in profit, 60 million the following year. The GAA shouldn't be apologetic about that. Like, that's great, and obviously using that money to feed back into the game, absolutely brilliant. But Tom Ryan is the GAA's Director of Finance, and he's just kind of making the point that actually it's not his view is that it isn't the full-time administrators at Croke Park that are the people who are the key driving force behind the GAA. It's more the volunteers, ergo we don't have to release those salaries. Now, I think he kind of accepts himself over the course of the piece that, you know, you could take a very counter view to that, which I think most people would, to be fair. They're obviously a body that get a huge amount of public funding, and I think people would be interested to know what those salaries are. Just an interesting piece. Sean Moran, page 22 of the Irish Times this morning.
It's an interesting one because you look at the professional sports organisations that at the top brass are exactly the same as the GAA, because regardless of the fact that the GAA sports people are amateur, at the top brass they're all professional people working in this. Like, you look at the Director General role, for example, and like, do we know the DG salary?
We don't, no.
So we can sit here and criticise the FAI or the IRFU all day long, but there is certainly more transparency when it comes to those figures. And some would argue that it's more important that we know how much the GAA DG is earning as opposed to what John Delaney is earning. I would argue it's more important that we know what the GAA is earning because, as I say, it is an amateur game that... And it's
like the national sport, there's a national interest element to it.
There's less of a sense of capitalism about the GAA, and that should be the way it always is, as long as there's an amateur ethos.
No, I think that's debatable. I think that's definitely debatable. I think that, like a lot of discussions we've been having over the last number of weeks and months and maybe years about the monies that are brought into the association and the methods by which they're brought in and how they're filtered out. I think it is a bit of a commercial beast. But my point is, I just don't think that's a particularly bad thing. But I do think, just in the interest of transparency, us knowing what those salaries are, and the fact that it's not like going into a private company to find out those things. It's fairly heavily funded, obviously. And again, it's the national sport. There's a national interest. We can't do any harm to be a bit more transparent about what those figures are.
Absolutely not, no. But like, they're saying they're defending the figures. There's no actual law where they have to release them. It is just in the interest of transparency, unless Moran is outlined.
They've taken a view on the I wasn't going to get into the terminology but it's the Financial Reporting Standard recommends that meant to include the aggregate payments to key management personnel. So the GAA are taking a view that key management personnel are not the full-time paid staff at Croke Park, more the management, volunteer management of the GAA. That's their view. I would think differently, but...
Yeah. I would think a lot of people would think differently of that, but it's fair enough, I guess. That's one way of getting by it.
Yeah. John O'Shea ready to retire. We mentioned this story in the back page of the Star this morning. Paul Lennon writes here, it doesn't say it's an exclusive, but I'm not picking it up elsewhere. He'll turn 37, I think, in April or thereabouts. He's a guy that I think a lot of people were expecting at the end of the previous campaign that John O'Shea was going to bow out, and he played a minimal part. I'd have to look and see what exact minutes he played over the course of that World Cup campaign, but
he was fourth choice by the end.
At any games that he played. But yeah, it looks as if he's going to bow out. I think he and Martin O'Neill had a conversation after the last campaign by way of, listen, like obviously we just qualified for that. We've got a good shout here. We've got young players coming through, a lot of particularly young players in his position. I would really appreciate if you hang on and lend your expertise and make that transition a bit smoother. Which, to be fair, probably worked, but it's probably not a bad time for him to go.
No, you would say that now is the time to go because it's just the start of another 2-year campaign. Like, you look at the potential involvement in a World Cup this year, and if John O'Shea's sole inclusion in the previous squad would have been to bring along the youngsters, then would he have been included in the World Cup squad? I would have my doubts. Like, yeah. I'm not sure about that whole thing of the elder statesmen being around there to hold the hands of the young fellas coming in. I mean, who is the young green centre back that aren't brought in? Of course, they've all got less experience than John O'Shea.
Duffy didn't have much experience before this previous campaign.
Sure, but he's getting his experience in the Premier League. He's getting.
Fair enough, but if I'm Martin O'Neill, saying to John O'Shea, listen, will you come in? He seems to be a good guy, like a good influence. He's not going to stink the joint out. He's not going to sort of sit around and be a toxic influence, I guess, in the squad. Like I think it's a bit of a win-win as long as he's happy to do it.
As long as he has a role to play as a footballer, because he is taking up a squad place in the team. I'm sure he probably did, but to say that his sole role was to just come in and essentially be half a coach, just be kind of a life coach to these kids that are coming in. And to be honest with you, they're not that young. They are in their early 20s, some of them.
Inexperienced more than young, is what I would say.
But I would also contend that they're playing in the Premier League. You look at Shane Duffy, you look at Kieran Clark, you look at Kevin Long, who got a good bit of Premier League experience around Christmas. That's where they've gained all their experience. Of course, Duffy's had high-profile international, let's say, successes and high-profile international failures as well. Like France is the obvious thing, and he will have learned hugely from that. Like, where does John O'Shea come into that? Like, maybe after the France game, he's saying to Shane Duffy, listen, being their mate kind of thing. And it's just like, why can't Roy Keane have those conversations? Why does it have to be like...
none of those things need to be mutually exclusive for me. Like, all those things can exist. Duffy can go and get all the best experience he can possibly get at Brighton. He can be the first team player that he is, and by all accounts the leader that he is in the pitch. He can be all of those things. Roy Keane can talk to him and go, here, listen, you shouldn't have done that, you should have done this, which I've seen him do on the pitch, specifically
that's what
with
your
Duffy.
Coach is there for.
The diagonal ball, you need to be at the back stick for it. But that isn't to say that John O'Shea can't still be there. Like you say, if there's going to be a couple of injuries, he's the guy who's going to come in, and you're actually okay with that, because while he hasn't got the pace that he had 5 or 10 years ago, he has all the nous. And at the same time, absolutely feeding into that sort of a guy who's coming towards the end of his career who might well be cut out to be a coach.
Absolutely.
So definitely feeding into that overall pool.
Yeah, as long as that's the bonus. Like, I'm saying, if that's your primary function in the squad, then you should not be in a squad. Like, I would say that he is...
You're misrepresenting my point entirely, and I've come to expect nothing less from you.
Fair. But anyway, I would say that he would have been Martin O'Neill's fourth choice centre-back anyway in the last campaign, so that's fair enough. He deserved to be in the squad. But if anybody suggests that like he should be in a squad just because he's old and experienced and has seen everything, then that's a load of nonsense.
I don't think so. I think that's good.
Basis.
I think that's good rationale.
It should be the bonus as opposed to the primary reason why you're in there. But anyway.
Okay, it's coming up on 8:15 on this Friday morning. Keep your comments coming into us here. Hashtag OTBAM. Leave a comment in the Facebook page or the YouTube page as well, which it turns out can get a bit saucy at times, it has to be said, on that YouTube channel. There's one other story as well about Jeremy Corbyn saying no to racism that we're going to get to in a couple of minutes. But before that, we want to bring you the very latest from the Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding trial, which continued in Belfast yesterday with more cross-examination of the woman who claims that she was raped by the Ireland and Ulster teammates at Jackson's home in 2016. The woman has now spent 5 days being cross-examined by 3 out of the 4 defence teams, and yesterday was the turn of the barrister representing Rory Harrison. Some of these details are gruesome. If there are young eyes or young ears listening or watching in, just as a word of warning on that. Our course correspondent Frank Greaney joins us now from Belfast. Good morning to you, Frank. So far, the trial's been dominated by the allegations made against Jackson and Olding. Can you remind us who Rory Harrison is and what he's accused of doing?
Sure. Good morning, Adrian. Yes, well, I suppose the trial has been dominated so far by Jackson and Olding, and not because of their high profiles, mostly because they're facing the most serious charges. They're both accused of raping this young woman, then a 19-year-old student, at Paddy Jackson's home at a party after a night out in Belfast in the early hours of June 28th, 2016. Now, there are 2 others on trial as well. There's a man called Blaine McElroy from Royal Lodge Road in Belfast City. He's facing 1 count of exposure. He denies that. And then Rory Harrison, the man that you mentioned at the top of the piece, he is also a friend of the 3 other accused. He's 25 years of age. He's from Mance Road in Belfast City, and he is facing charges of perverting the course of justice and withholding information. He's the only one of the 4 that isn't facing any sexual offences. He's effectively accused of trying to cover up what happened by misleading police after he was initially taken in as a witness to give a witness statement, and also he's accused of deleting text messages that were exchanged between him and the complainant in the aftermath of what's alleged to have happened.
Yeah, I know yesterday's proceedings were brief, but you might just talk to us about where the trial goes from here and how long is expected, when it's expected to wrap up.
Yeah, the cross-examination was brief yesterday. Gavin Duffy is the barrister who was representing Rory Harrison. He only spent about a half an hour cross-examining the complainant because a lot of the questions that he was putting to her yesterday were agreed. There were disputes in some areas, and I'll walk you through those. But she said that the jury have already been shown CCTV stills of Rory Harrison leaving a nightclub the night before, and her also leaving, and they were leaving separately. They did meet back at back at Jackson's party, and she had said previously that she probably spoke to Rory Harrison more than she had anybody else, that she had danced with him a little, that they had some fun together. But her main interactions with him were after the alleged rapes. She said that he followed her out of the house as she was leaving and helped her home, got her a taxi home, walked her to the door. They exchanged numbers. She texted her afterwards, told her to keep the chin up, texted her again the following morning to see if she was okay. And Mr. Duffy, on behalf of his client, went through all of this yesterday, and he reminded her of a text that she sent to a friend where she had said that she believed Rory Harrison's actions to be genuine, and she was pushed on that again yesterday, and she said that she had no complaint to make against him, that he couldn't have done more for her, and that she was very grateful that he had brought her home. Now, a couple of areas that were in dispute were little specific details about, for example, where they met before she left the house. Mr. Harrison said that she was on the landing at the top of the stairs, very near Paddy Jackson's bedroom, when he met her, just before he was going up to say goodnight to Paddy Jackson, who was in his bedroom. Now, she claims that she went into the house again after the alleged rapes to pick up a phone that she had left behind her, and that it was at this point that she met him. As she was leaving the house, he was in the hallway. She came down the stairs. He was in the hallway. He followed her out, and she was initially concerned that he had followed her out, but that he did comfort her on the way out. Now, another area that was in dispute as well was his claim, and he said this to police, that she was staring, that he looked at her at one point during the party, and he formed the view that she was staring at Paddy Jackson. Now, she's been asked this repeatedly during cross-examination by the other 2 defence barristers representing Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding, and she denies this. And she said yesterday that she denies it as well. But Gavin Duffy asked her, was her memory hazy that night? And she said yes, that she'd been drinking and that it was hazy. She accepted that it was. And he said, well, if that is the case, if your memory is hazy, then is there a possibility that my client is right on that issue, that you were staring at Paddy Jackson? And she said yes, there's a possibility that he's right, but he's sitting in the dock. Now, his cross-examination concluded shortly after that. The jury isn't hearing from many witnesses today. It does have some work to do at 10:30 when it reconvenes. But the next cross-examination will take place on Monday morning, and that will be by the barrister representing Stuart Olding, who is facing 1 count of exposure, which he denies. This trial was set down for 5 weeks. We're now almost through the 2nd week, 3 weeks left to go, Adrian.
Frank Greaney of Belfast, thanks a lot for joining us on OTBAM this morning. One other story that we want to get to on the newspapers before we bring you some rugby preview for the weekend was Jeremy Corbyn, across a lot of the papers this morning, but including here at the Guardian, say no to racism. He was at Show Racism, the Red Card event yesterday. This was on the back of the J. Rodriguez FA charge of racial abuse. He denies the charge and says he's going to challenge it. And Jeremy Corbyn comes out and says that in terms of, he's concerned about there being incidents of racism at the World Cup in Russia, and And his recommendation is that any player who suffers from racist abuse during the World Cup should walk off the pitch. Now, I just think somebody in Jeremy Corbyn's position, it feels to me to be trite, cheap, easy commentary that doesn't really make any difference, never really comes back to him. And I just think somebody in his position has the capacity he's got influence. He can actually go and do something about this thing. It just feels that he was at that event yesterday to endorse something that we should all obviously get behind. But he's not like you or I. This is a guy of immense power, obviously, in the UK that perhaps is headed to the top office if everything we read is accurate. And I think that actually it's just a really cheap, easy commentary thing to say that just recommend if you suffer from racist abuse during the World Cup, you should walk off the pitch, as opposed to actually... I'd be interested to see what he has to say if something comes out of this Jay Rodriguez case or the next case of racism in UK football, because he can actually influence that process. Yeah,
for sure. It does seem just kind of like Jeremy Corbyn showed up to this thing without having thought about it, or isn't aware of the Suleiman Tari situation previously, or isn't aware of the history of kind of almost systematic abuse from the stands that has occurred in Russian club football, and has just kind of thrown this out there that I'll just remove yourself from the situation. And that is never the solution. It probably is not a solution at all in this situation. And it just, as I say, like you can be very, very hard on Corbyn for saying something like this. It just strikes me as somebody who just hasn't thought about it, who just doesn't have the research done into what's happened here, people who have walked off the pitch, and whether or not that has worked for that person. You don't agree with him that there's going to be very much it isn't going to be an issue in Russia? It could be outside of grounds. I think in the grounds, I think we're going to see a sheen on this World Cup for sure. We're not going to see the real Russia replicated inside those stadiums. I just suspect that the authorities that be will be able to put a stranglehold on who will be allowed to enter the stadiums, who will be around the fan parks. And I would actually be very surprised if this whole kind of, Russia versus England sort of fan violence, I know it's separate to racism, but this fan violence and hooliganism thing, if that actually does escalate, because the authorities in Russia might be able to, I don't know, stamp down on that sort of thing. I'm not suggesting how they might do that or what they might do to stop this. Most countries do anyway, right? Like, no matter where you are, like there was a heightened sense of it in France for the Euros. Like, most countries do take the view that, you know what, like when this tournament is on, we would do it if we'd gotten the Rugby World Cup. I mean, it's probably a poor example, I appreciate, but we would have done the same thing. Like a good sort of analogy that you use, you get the Mr. Sheen out and you polish things up and you go, look at our lovely shiny mantelpiece over here, and that isn't a proper representation of how things are. Now, obviously there's a deeper cultural issue in Russia that you're speaking about there. Yeah, it's a separate point, to be fair. It's not connected with racism, to be honest with you, but it does kind of tie into the whole polishing of society in Russia, basically. And this event was whatever, show racism the red card. I've got a feeling Russia may sweep racism under the carpet, so to speak, during this thing. And racism, what racism? Exactly. That being said, I do think that point just pertains to the stadiums. There's only so much control you can do outside of the fan parks and outside of the stadiums. And if Russia and I know this is getting away from racism again, but if Russia fans and English fans want to go at it, they will find a place to go and do it. I just think around the stadiums where all the media is going to be centred on, it won't be seen. And I think by extension, I think that will kind of apply to racism as well. Like, yeah, I think for a Russia club game, this is very different to any Russia club game. Here, look, I totally agree. The one thing that I think is that the one thing that sort of annoyed me a little bit about the Jeremy Corbyn thing that was the point that I'm really trying to get at, is that it's really easy to say, yeah, those Russians, and their racist culture, it's really shocking, and if any player out there, comes across this sort of activity, they should get out of there, walk off the pitch and, take affirmative action. It's really easy to say that these things exist elsewhere without ever really having to turn the mirror on yourself. That's really what I'm saying. Yeah, I guess you're right. Like, I mean, at the same time, though, he surely can't be just pointing at Russia and saying to himself, that is the only place where racism in football occurs. There's
Jay Rodriguez case ongoing. You can't talk about the specifics, obviously of it if you're Jeremy Corbyn, because it's the FA, not a legal case yet.
But Jeremy Corbyn lives in a country where this is one of the lowest profile racism cases. I mean, go back to Patrice Evra-Lewis Suarez. Go back to Ferdinand and
that's
Terry.
what I'm saying. These things exist and it's on doorstep. You don't need to point at Russia. You can say, actually, we've got an issue with this here, and here's affirmatively how we need to take action against it.
But is he showing a complete lack of awareness of that? Surely he hasn't missed these racism scandals.
He seems to be a football fan as well, you know? Like, it's not like he's sort of jolly-come-lately to this thing in a way that... Was it Cameron sort of was a...
Yeah, he changed his team from West Ham to Villa or something, was it?
Yeah.
I don't recall, but who cares about David Cameron anyway?
Right, that's a fairly decent way to end that. We do have some comments coming in. We had hoped to speak with Shane Williams on the show this morning on. I don't know if this is going to be news to you or not, but Shane Williams is not joining us, so yeah. It's news.
Eddie Jones got to him as well.
He did. Wales have shut everything down. But we do have some comments coming in from Conor Rob here, and this opens up in a way that I think if you could just make every text they get into us this morning could open up like this. Have to disagree with Owen. So Conor Rob, fair play to you. It's not fair enough trying to avoid disclosing the salaries of the top brass in the GAA because volunteers are seemingly the legitimate top managers in the organisation. It's laughable at best and at worst displays real contempt for GAA followers. That's the view of Conor Rob this morning.
I meant it was fair enough on a legal basis. I don't think they're...
Listen, if Conor Rob is misrepresenting your point, he is a regular viewer to OTBAM.
No, he's not misrepresenting. I did use the term fair enough, but I meant it in a legal sense. He's banging the money there as well, though, on the volunteer basis. And it goes back to my point that if we're seeing John Delaney's salary, then, you know, like he's all his players that play for the FAI, to a certain extent anyway, for the national team, are professional footballers. It's a volunteer-based ethos in the GAA. There should be more of a push for the GAA top brass salaries than there is in the FAI.
I think that's fair enough. Kevin Conroy on Twitter, who really cares whether... A lot of stuff coming in John O'Shea. Who really cares whether John O'Shea retires? I didn't even think he was still playing club football.
Wow, yeah, well, that's what happens when you're not playing the Premier League.
Disappear out of the top echelons. Rob Byrne, lads, you seem surprised by a socialist putting a simplistic tint on a complex issue. Yeah,
well, that's not a fair point. I was hoping not to get into that in terms of Corbyn's actual politics, but there is a nub of truth in that, and I think the simplistic political mind might be now changing in Jeremy Corbyn's view. You know, like last year, peak Corbyn, Glastonbury, pyramid stage. It's like, wow,
Jeremy
this guy.
Corbyn.
And then you start to look around and you're like, wait a minute, I'm watching a politician on the pyramid stage at Glastonbury. This thing is not all that it seems. So I think maybe there's a bit of a slipping of the mask there.
Fran B tweets on Twitter, says John O'Shea being kept around for continuity of culture, which he very succinctly sums up the point that I was trying to make. Much more accurately
and succinct. He should get a job in the media.
Luke McGuinness says O'Shea was an amazing player and serving for Ireland, but he should retire now, and I think that is generally the sentiment, and probably, it seems, according to Paul Lennon at the Star this morning at least, that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to get the thoughts of Kevin Kilbane on all of that shortly. Do keep your comments coming in, by the way, on hashtag OTBAM or on the Facebook page or on that saucy YouTube channel as well. It's can get pretty fruity down there at times, so yeah, try and sort of keep the abuse to a minimal as much as you possibly can.
What do you mean?
Have you been? Do you delve into the YouTube comments?
I don't like to engage with my haters.
Yeah. I'm not saying they're not. I wouldn't identify. There isn't a single example that sort of comes to mind of Owen Sheehan.
But you've said saucy twice. How are they saucy?
They can get, not in a pleasant way, out of hand very quickly.
Okay.
YouTube seems. I absolutely no sort of previous experience of this up to about 6 months ago, but it really seems to be a bit of a cesspit in terms of the commentaries.
Well, we should definitely clip this Jeremy Corbyn chat we just had and put it up there. That will do very, very well.
Good shot. I'm liking that. Right, we're going to talk to Kevin Kilbane very shortly, get his thoughts on Wes Hoolahan's retirement. We're going to talk to him about John O'Shea and the potential that he'll bow out. We're going to talk to him about an interesting story in relation to Riyad Mahrez and some comments from Neil Lennon in regard to that yesterday. And we're also going to talk to him about the North London derby. It's Tottenham against Arsenal, so we're going to get all of that good stuff. Hopefully Kevin is in his kitchen this morning. Hopefully his flight's been on time this week home, because we really need a guest, so we're going to talk.
Did he actually make that flight last week is my question.
In a few minutes. He's just awake, apparently. Tommy's telling me we are good to go. So before all of that, it is a big weekend of the rugby, and do remember as well that we're going to be with you live from the Aviva Stadium tomorrow with the Aviva Fan Studio. Donncha Ryan is going to be there. Mike McCarthy is going to be there. He loves a good hashtag, does Mike. And Fiona Steed is going to be there as well. It's all at the Aviva Fan Studio, and there's an opportunity for you to come and join us. Just check out, if you're watching us on Facebook, don't turn off the feed, but do go and just scroll down a couple of posts where you'll see an opportunity for you to enter a competition to come and join us at the Aviva Fan Studio tomorrow. So it's going to be an absolute belter. Check out hashtag Aviva Fan Studio as well over the weekend. We're on the Off the Ball social channels from, I think, about just before 2 o'clock. Tomorrow we're going to be with you. So, big rugby weekend. Ireland versus Italy, of course, at the Aviva tomorrow, 2:15 start. Here's Brian O'Driscoll chatting about the threat of Wales in this year's Six Nations. This was earlier on the week on the show.
The Gats thing will always be relevant when he's coaching against Ireland. He did feel badly burnt by it, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. And then you have the added impact of what went on, what was said after the Lions tour with Sean O'Brien. Yeah. That also will have a bearing on how he preps the team for the week, and how he, the extra words that he says in the dressing room beforehand. Or
he counted up every minute Sean O'Brien had played for Ireland against Wales that night at the Stella. He'd gone off and done work. He'd got somebody to look up the stats on how often Sean O'Brien had played for Ireland against Wales, and how many of those games he'd won. It was like, he's a man who bears grudges.
He absolutely is. And he didn't need extra ammunition because of the stinging he got from Ireland when he was let go and Eddie O'Sullivan was promoted in 2001. But it's been added with what happened during the summer and the aftermath. So, he will have his team rightly primed for this, because they've come and spoiled the party before. They'll have... it won't be... the thing too as well, and maybe that's us looking at ourselves in a selfish way, they'll also be thinking slam.
Totally.
They're not thinking, we'll stop Ireland from winning, a slam. They're thinking, this is a year for us to win a slam. Trying to think when they last won one, was it in 2012? They came to Ireland and beat us. Remember that Stephen Ferris tip tackle that allowed Halfpenny to knock over a late penalty, and that was the difference. They'll feel that they can break this Ireland defence down, and with the confidence that they're playing with, hard to argue with that.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Well made. The Grand Slam is still on for Wales as well. Nobody's really been giving them a great shake of winning this thing, but I think the win over Scotland last weekend and the comprehensive nature of it has everybody suddenly thinking that actually maybe this Wales team are up to something. We'll see what happens. I think tomorrow's game, is it tomorrow, the Wales-England game? Or is it
yes, tomorrow at 4:45.
4:45. That's going to be fascinating, and it'll inform us much more on the greater picture of where this championship is headed. So I think we can all get behind Italy, apart from this weekend, given that they now, of course, have an Irish head coach in the shape of Conor O'Shea. So he was asked yesterday in the lead into this game about why he didn't select Ian McKinley in his matchday 23.
He was disappointed because he wants to play. That's the bottom line. And I knew it would mean a lot to him. So, said as much. But the last thing, Ian's a rugby player. He's not a romantic story. Ian wants to be picked because he is the number one rugby player and he's right to be in this team at the time, not because he's a story. And, sport is full of romance. But the hard-nosed side of it is, if at the moment Tommy Allen had the jersey last week, was outstanding, and Carlo Canna is one of the top point scorers in Pro 14 rugby, is an exciting attacking talent and is different, brings a different skill set. So he can do something that a lot of other rugby players can't when you see him play. So Ian, I'd love to have picked him. I wanted to pick him. In so many ways, but how could you say to the other players you're not picked because you want to pick Ian on a romance? Ian is here as a rugby player. He's a bloody good rugby player, and he has forced his way from going to junior club rugby, coaching in rugby, going into Zebra on a trial, going over to Treviso. He has by force of nature. So I'm sure this setback in his mind will only steel him even further to put more pressure on the guys above. And that's what he said to me. He said, I want to be a headache.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Interesting story there on Ian McKinley from Conor O'Shea. We also got his thoughts this week on Jordan Larmour. Conor O'Shea is a guy who knows a thing or two about those sort of positions that Jordan Larmour will play. So after it was put to him that there were similarities between Conor O'Shea and Jordan Larmour.
No. He reminds me of a young Christian Cullen. That's what he reminds me of. Because I haven't seen someone who can step off both feet like that. I couldn't even step off a foot. I just ran straight the whole time. So no, he's talented, and hopefully we'll welcome him. Personally, I can't wait to see him up close in Bristol. I hope he doesn't do too well. He is box office, isn't he? So to have that sort of ability, and I'm sure Joe will nurture him through the way only Joe does. And I'd love to be in a fullback who could step off both feet and gas people from 70 yards every week. So it'll be fun watching him when he comes on. But listen, we'll look at him after the game. There's a 21-year-old playing fullback for us that has got some feet himself. He's not the tallest. I thought his performance, Matteo Manozzi, last week was outstanding against England. To think 6-7 months ago he was playing junior rugby for Calvisano. He played 6-7 months there for Zebra, and he goes out and he came off the bench 3 times in the autumn, but that was his first test in front of... so hopefully, rather than talking about Ireland X Factor, people get a chance to see some of ours.
Yeah, Conor O'Shea there. The ever-modest Conor O'Shea, I'd say he wouldn't mind to have played in an Ireland team, the current Ireland team. I know from the PCW Paul Kimmage a couple of weeks ago, the frustration of having played in an era where it was really up the jumper stuff, and as a fullback you probably didn't get to see too much of the ball. So hopefully that's the case for Italy. Obviously tomorrow they don't get to see too much of it, so we'll have live updates and match build-up and preview and all of that good stuff for you across Off the Ball on the radio and online over the course of tomorrow. Meanwhile, the Barometer's on the way, of course. I know that's why you're hanging around. And Kevin
Why
Kilbane,
I'm hanging around.
Kevin Kilbane is going to be here as well in just a couple of minutes. Some good stuff to talk to him about, at the very least, if you're not hanging around for the Barometer. But before all of that, Owen's been keeping across some developments in the US overnight, Owen. Yeah,
there's been some big stuff in the NFL in terms of contracts, big stuff in the NBA because it was trade deadline yesterday. But I just want to start with one thing from Philadelphia was their homecoming parade yesterday. I want to play you a video of Jason Kelsey. He's a Philadelphia centre, first of all, and he was pretty excited while speaking at yesterday's celebratory parade in Philly.
Doug Peterson. When Doug Peterson was hired, he was rated as the worst coaching hire by a lot of freaking analysts out there in the media. This past offseason, some clown named Mike Lombardi told him that he was the least qualified head coach in the NFL. You saw a driven Doug Peterson, a man who went for it on 4th and down. Went for it on 4th and down in the Super Bowl with the trick play. He wasn't playing just to go mediocre. He's playing for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think Jason Kelsey is a fan of his head coach there. Seems kind of like they wrote us off all season is what he's trying to say there in harmony.
Didn't understand a word of it, I won't lie to you. That was just generally shouting at the microphone. Why was he dressed like Aladdin?
I don't know, but I just thought that the tone of his voice was quite funny, so we decided to play that. But enough of Philly. We've spoken about them all week.
We'll speak about them possibly again before we leave at 9 o'clock, but that's fine. Go
possibly.
ahead.
I want to chat about Jimmy Garoppolo because he is the highest paid player in the NFL right now. Anybody at home will know Jimmy Garoppolo because Jerry Gilroy has been talking about him on this show pretty much every day for the last 5 or 6 months since he joined his beloved San Francisco. There he is up on screen. Stupid, sexy Jimmy Garoppolo, as I like to call him. He signed a $27.5 million per year deal, a 5-year deal.
He's got a bit of the Dustin Johnsons about him, has he?
Yeah, he does. A 5-year contract in weekly terms, because I suppose that's the best way we can put it into our cash from the Premier League anyway, is that he's going to earn $528,000 per week with this new 5-year contract. He moved from the Pats after 11 games of the season just gone, and he played absolutely lights out football. He helped the 49ers win 5 straight games to end the season. He's only started 7 games in his entire career in the NFL, and he's already the highest paid player.
Wow.
He's won all 7 games, granted, and I think there was a lot of despondentness in this studio despondence in the studio when he left the Patriots because people just couldn't realise why the hell Bill Belichick traded him away. And I think those regrets are going to get higher and higher as the years progress because he's a huge talent and he's earned his money already. So 528k per week for Jimmy Garoppolo. The other big story from the US overnight was the NBA trade deadline, which is always a very funny one because LeBron James basically gets out his mobile phone and starts doing all the trades on behalf of the Cavaliers. That the GM for the Cavs is basically pointless. So the big one yesterday was that the Cavs...
As in he's texting guys to go, hey...
Yeah, a small bit.
Okay.
It's not his job technically, but everybody says LeBron.
If I've got LeBron in my locker, I'm going to use that.
Yeah, for sure. But so anyway, the Cavs were at the centre of a huge trade yesterday. They traded away Isaiah Thomas and Channing Frye and a protected 2018 first-round draft pick to the LA Lakers, who Magic Johnson is GM for at the moment. They got back Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance Jr. Then Cleveland, they traded Jay Crowder and Derrick Rose, who a former MVP, to the Utah Jazz, Iman Shumpert, and a 2020 second-round draft pick to the Sacramento Kings. Then Jazz in return gave Rodney Hood, who basketball fans would know is a very good player, to Cleveland, and Joe Johnson to Sacramento. Then the Kings traded George Hill, another excellent basketball player, to Cleveland. So Cleveland are coming out of this looking very, very well. LeBron James has created a team that is much more defensively capable than they were. They always had great players. Isaiah Thomas is a great offensive player, defensively woeful, and that's what's been letting them down all season. So this is to win a title, basically. They feel that defenses win titles. And the other big one was that they traded away Dwayne Wade. He's gone back to Miami for a protected second-round draft pick. So the wine-drinking buddies of LeBron and Dwayne Wade have broken up once again. So basically, Magic Johnson here is the other big story. He's essentially cleared up enough cap space for 2 max contracts. There he is there for free agents at the end of the season. That is big news because LeBron James becomes a free agent at the end of the season and Paul George becomes a free agent at the end of the season. Is Magic Johnson clearing cap space to bring those 2 guys to LA next summer? There is a high possibility he is, and that would be some prospect. That would be a championship level winning team if you manage to bring LeBron James and Paul George to LA, and it could be the next start of a great LA franchise under one Magic Johnson.
I stopped listening when you said Jimmy Garoppolo is earning 508 grand a week.
528 grand.
Oof.
It's dollars though, so what's that about?
Oh, look, I mean, sorry, that's absolute context.
It's not even €500,000, is it, per week? So
it is absolutely sick, isn't it?
Nothing at all. Yeah, it is, but
not in a cool way.
Not in a cool way.
It's disgusting.
It is disgusting, but if there wasn't,
they're worth it, Owen. They're worth it. You know, these guys are worth it. Is that what you're going to tell me? It's
kind of yes. That's exactly what I'm going to tell you. Like, is Lionel Messi worth that money? I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo is probably going to become the best NFL player around. Lionel Messi earns that money per week.
No, Jimmy Garoppolo is probably going to become the best NFL player around, having started seven games. Is that what you were?
Yeah, he's won them all.
Lionel Messi's proven over a decade that he is the best player on the planet.
I guess
give or take
that is a fair point. I will accept that. I can't really defend that. I guess also though a key word is the NFL and the multi-billion-dollar franchise that it is.
I'm with you. I hear that. Some stuff coming through to us here in terms of the Jeremy Corbyn players should walk off the pitch if they're racially abused in Russia. Points agree fully, says Alan Moore. However, it shouldn't be just the World Cup. Such scumbaggery rose more than 20% in the UK and is everywhere. It's wrong at all levels. Some good stats there. I don't know how you get that. Racism is of course wrong. Players and fans use whatever they can to get into another player's head to affect their mindset. I just don't think that's really anything to do with the point. I think if that's what we're dealing with, that players are using racial abuse to do what Eddie Jones is trying to do by other means, I think that's an entirely separate and different conversation. Right, coming up on 9:15, we're going to talk to Kevin Kilbane very shortly. He's out of his bed, he's good to go, he's in his kitchen. We're not going to take a look in the fridge. We've promised him we're not going to take a look in the fridge this week, so that won't be what we'll be doing, but we'll be talking football very shortly. But before all of that, yesterday on the Keith Andrews Show, which airs right here on the Off the Ball social channels every Thursday at around lunchtime, much of the talk was understandably dominated by the announcement of Wes Hoolahan's retirement from international football. Here is a snippet of Keith's thoughts on his international career. You can watch the whole show back. It's on our YouTube channel or listen back in the podcast.
That's probably something that annoys me a little bit. The fact that he has been seen as a luxury type player.
I wonder, is the off-the-ball work that some of the Ireland players do, is that really conducive to an Irish system? As in the high pressing, the winning the ball back, counter-attacking, as in it has been more of a sit-deep, kind of wait-and-see, patient sort of game. And without the ball then, I wonder, does Wes Hoolahan, is he a little bit defunct?
Yeah, it is a conundrum, because he's probably one of the most clever and intelligent players I've played with in terms of the positions he picks up, and I keep going back to him in terms of that style. When you play with him, your whole team just changes, because if I go back to when he first came in that Greece game in November 2012, we'd have had a midfielder. I've already mentioned Glenn Whelan, James McCarthy, can't remember who else was in the squad, maybe a Darren Gibson. You've got similar-ish type players, all with different attributes, but they're centre midfielders, whereas Wes is just totally different. And even what's available now, or what's been available in the last couple of years, you've mentioned Harry Arthur, you've got Brady, Hendrick, all different players. We've got no one else like Wes Hoolahan, we really don't.
The Keith Andrews Show every Thursday right here on the Off The Ball social channels. One of the best pundits, if not the best pundit around, Kevin?
He's very good. Excellent he is, yeah. One of the best around. I agree with that.
Top pundit?
Top notch, yeah, top notch.
Good man, good stuff. You're not
Wait a minute, that's not your kitchen, Kevin. That's
Where's
not your kitchen in the United Kingdom. That seems oddly
Kevin
like
Kilbane Towers.
That seems oddly like your apartment in Dublin, Kevin. Did you miss your flight?
No, not at all, Owen. Yeah. But why are you suggesting that?
Oh, sorry, it just looks oddly familiar to the living room that we speak to you when you're speaking to us from Dublin, that's all.
Here,
right, really.
Let's talk football. Let's talk about Wes. So he's announced his retirement, and there's been a lot of tributes over the last 24 hours thereabouts. I was looking back at it. I think your career and his overlapped by about 3 years, but it was in that time where he didn't really make an impact. Maybe only got one cap. You might not have seen very much of him around the training ground, I guess.
No, he came in during, I think it was actually when Don Givens was in temporary charge. He came in for the Greece game. I actually wasn't involved in that squad, but he actually did come into a squad that I was involved in a number of years ago as well. So, yeah, we didn't get a chance I didn't get a chance to see him too much in and around the squad. But even watching him from afar, playing against him, chatting to him, you could tell, yeah, he was a very, very talented footballer. I think we all knew that. And probably didn't get as many caps as, or certainly wasn't around the squad as much as he perhaps should have been over the years.
Yeah, so like even on that point and on the great tributes that have come in and the amazing player that he's been that everybody's spoken about over the last 24 hours, like you'd have to ask if people talk about this incredibly talented player who did it on the stage for Ireland, should have got a whole bunch more caps, probably should have played at a higher level, should have played at better clubs for longer. Like, it does leave me with the question if he got the best out of his career.
Well, I think that's probably the overriding question, I think, from his career. I think it's probably fair to ask that one. And, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what he would or how he would answer that question himself if it were put to him. I think the suggestion is, I think he said it himself in various interviews, he probably didn't conduct himself probably great off the pitch. I think when in his younger days, that might have gone against him. It goes to show that I think from Wes retiring, it does go to show me that a career is over with so quickly, and judgments are passed on players so quickly when they're maybe 19, 20, 21, 22, and they're still young men, young lads. And that can maybe carry you through for the rest of your career. And that's maybe one of the reasons why he maybe didn't necessarily go on and maybe play at the top level from when he was a young lad, because I know that the big one over him was, yes, he wasn't tall enough, he wasn't big enough. That was one thing that was put against him. But it's maybe the attitude that maybe he would have taken, maybe the attitude off the pitch. Maybe was that something that went before him when he was a younger man? I don't know. I'm just maybe asking those questions, and it'd be interesting to ask him that question, or if that question was put to him in the coming weeks, I would say.
Is it fair to say his international career was defined by the things he couldn't do rather than the things he could do?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a great point, actually, isn't it? I think he was overlooked by certain managers because, again, maybe his physical attributes went against him. Certainly, he was maybe looked upon as maybe being a weak link when you didn't have the ball, which I didn't necessarily agree with, because I think when you watch Wes playing, I think he was the one that would always instigate a press in games. He would always he would always close down very, very quickly. It was maybe his positional sense when he didn't have the ball. If you were playing in a functional team like Giovanni Trapattoni's side was, in that sort of functional side, you almost had to hold a position. You didn't necessarily have a leeway to run out of your shape, run off that shape, and then you maybe get yourself caught out quite quickly. If I looked at that functional side, we had very much a 4-4-2 position. Everyone held that position, and if you strayed from that, then you got caught out, and that was why he didn't necessarily get the game time under Trapattoni. So, yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think it is a fair point, Owen, that if he maybe stuck to a position and held a role in a side, I think he maybe would have got more caps.
John O'Shea, Kev, there's a line in the Star this morning, Paul Lennon has it, that it seems as if he's about to retire, and that I think he's saying that Glenn Whelan and John Walters might possibly continue, but that John O'Shea, who turns 37, I think a little bit later in the year, is about to retire. Probably not a great surprise to anybody, really.
No, if that was the case, it certainly wouldn't surprise me. I think John O'Shea's had the questions that I remember. I was getting asked the question. As soon as you turn about 28 within the Irish setup, people are asking you questions. Are you going to retire? I think John O'Shea's probably had that question levelled at him, maybe 4 or 5 campaigns now. But I mean, John now, you look at certainly the age he's at. The game time he would have got through the last campaign as well. I think that question maybe will be put to him, and we'll see what happens. It wouldn't surprise me. I think he's had an amazing international career, and I think it's probably got to the stage now where he's asking his wife, he's asking his club managers, certainly Chris Coleman and maybe Simon Grayson before him as well. What do you think yourself? And then he can maybe listen to what they all say, take it on board, and then he'll maybe review that going forward.
What's your view on that idea, just on a shape briefly, that the players sort of hanging around to lend a bit of expertise and nous to some of the younger players? Owen was making the point earlier on that he shouldn't, if he's not playing, he shouldn't be in.
No, I don't agree with that whatsoever. I really don't. I look back when I went into the squad, not wanting to put you down here, Owen, at all, but
go for it, Gavin.
When I first got into the squad, I had Tony Cascarino, I had Andy Townsend, I had Ray Houghton. When I first got, and I was in awe of these guys. I mean, these were my heroes growing up. But all of a sudden, I've got these guys around me. Packy Bonner had just become coach. I had Niall Quinn, Roy Keane. I mean, Roy Keane, he's only a few years older than me, but he was still one of the players that I looked up to when I was a kid growing up. And to have these huge heroes of mine in the squad, I was just like, God, this is unbelievable. So there will still be lads within that squad that will be coming in, whether you're 19, 20. And you'll see John O'Shea as this player, this iconic player that they would have loved when they were growing up. So, no, I don't buy that one. Not at all.
I think I was more making the point that shouldn't be his primary function, Kevin. Like, I mean, obviously...
you're attracted to that point after some discussion.
Not really. That was my initial point. It was just...
But you underestimate what they actually bring on the training ground, how their professionalism and what they're doing is influencing the next generation. Of course, John O'Shea wants to play. Primarily, you're right, he wants to play games, but don't overlook that fact of what he's actually bringing to our next generation of international footballers.
Kev, just to move it on a bit, we wanted to talk about an interesting piece that Neil Lennon had, some interesting comments that Neil Lennon had in relation to the Riyad Mahrez situation at Leicester City. Himself, a former Leicester City player, of course, and Riyad Mahrez has missed, I think, 5 training sessions. He's missed 2 games. There's no indication, in fact, he's not going to be in the squad for the game this weekend. And Neil Lennon has shed some light on this entire situation. A guy who's had his battles before as well, very publicly and very well communicated and spoken about as well. But he's talking about Mahrez and the fact that he feels, sources saying that Mahrez may well be very depressed in this entire situation, which is a new wrinkle to the previously sort of one-dimensional conversation about Mahrez obviously trying to force through a move and it not being successful. He throws his toys out of the pram, but that there might be something else at play. I know you're a big fan of the PFA. Is it on them now almost to step in here and take some control of this situation?
Yeah, I mean, however this situation is rectified, whatever is being said maybe internally now to Mahrez, first of all, he needs to get back training. He's got to get back playing. If he's not in the mental state to do that, then the discussions has got to be had on who he's going to see, certainly from a mental point of view. Counselling could be an option for him. I think the suggestion is, I'm sure most people would say, look, he's just got to get on with it. He's been paid X amount of money a week. Don't even worry about it. But there are more complex factors within a sports person's mind, and you know that as well as I do. You lads, you've interviewed enough sportsmen and women. You've interviewed people suggesting otherwise. That look, it's if things don't necessarily go the way that you envisage in your head, and things don't necessarily go right for you, and that can be problems off the pitch as well as on it. And I think this is a different issue. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, players do suffer mentally, and I've come across it. I've maybe experienced it myself as well in the past, and I know the work that the PFA do to try to help out certain players at different levels. So you only need to look. I mean, if anyone can catch the interview with Billy Key that he did on the BBC over the last few days, he's an Accrington Stanley player. Brilliant interview, and how the anxiety maybe overtook his career. So yeah, there are a number of factors here. I don't know. I don't know Riyad Mahrez whatsoever, but the interview with Neil Lennon in the Star was quite poignant in my mind. Yeah.
Only be as giving as you want to be, but just on your own experience of it, and like the point that you touched on, there is definitely a perception out there. There certainly has been. It's probably been scratched away at over the last few years that, you know, professional sports people, they're earning a lot of money, they have a very privileged lifestyle, and ergo everything should be fine. That's not the way it works.
It's not. It doesn't matter what you're earning. It doesn't matter what your career is or what your profession is. It doesn't matter. Certainly mental issues can affect anyone, and it will affect anyone from any walk of life. So I think certainly, I've spoken to Neil Lennon. Neil Lennon spoke very openly about it as well. I was actually talking to an ex-teammate of mine in the last few weeks regarding this issue. He's come to the end of his playing career. He's had issues. He's spoken to the PFA. The PFA have helped him out as well. And it's, whatever stage of your career you're at as well. Again, Riyad Mahrez is right bang in the middle of his career at this moment. But certainly players through the careers are going to have very much an up and down time, certainly from a mental perspective. This is a time when, I say Riyad Mahrez, again, I don't know, I'm not privy to him. I don't know what conversations have been had with Leicester and Mahrez, with the PFA essentially as well, with his agent. I don't know what conversations have been had, but I think when players are at various stages of their career, they're asking themselves serious questions as to where their life is going. So yeah, certainly it is a tough environment to be part of, definitely.
Are mental health issues, Kevin, stigmatised in the dressing room?
No, certainly not. No, I think they would have been at one stage. If I look back, I first went into the professional game when I left school at 16, so that was 93 now. It seems so long ago, but I was on the cusp of two very, very different times within football. I was on the back end of an era when it was literally, lads, just get on with it. Lads were going out 3 and 4 times a week, and many times as well. I would have thought lads were going out maybe just to try and shield something from the mind at times as well. Then I went through to the mid-90s when professionalism was of the utmost. If you were going out, you simply weren't having a career in the game. So that then brought in a different sort of side of it, where you had to maybe think about your thoughts. People then were starting to talk openly about seeing psychologists. People were starting to talk openly about seeing mind coaches and maybe getting counselling for various issues that they were having themselves. So yeah, I'm proud that I was maybe part of that era of football where it was basically, it was probably no holds barred at the time. It was just basically get on with it. But also the fact is that the more mindful player, I think, started to come in. I think the more mindful person, and I think coaching changed around that time, around how to deal with players that were having various mental issues. So again, maybe different eras, but of course, I think in general, I think the game has certainly changed now.
Yeah, interesting piece as well on the BBC website. Definitely worth checking out with the Accrington Stanley striker Billy Key this week. That's definitely worth checking out in that context as well. Kev, I want to talk to you a little bit about the football, the North London Derby, of course. And I think the main thing that kind of struck out for me, there's some good quotes from Arsene Wenger about English being expert in divers, which I definitely sort of tickled me a little bit this morning. But outside of that, before we get into it, there's been a lot of sort of lauding of what Pochettino has done and what Spurs have done, the style of play that they have, and on the flip side, a lot of berating of Arsenal for the exact opposite of that. But for all of that, and I know they don't have a good recent record against them, but for all of that, if Arsenal do manage to get the win at the weekend, they'll only be a point behind Spurs.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. And it has got to this stage, certainly a number of years ago, it got to this stage where Arsenal were a little bit behind, and now all of a sudden they start to gain momentum going into this North London derby. They're on a roll. They've certainly at home they're playing very well. It's away from home that's been costing Arsenal this season, I suppose. It's an interesting one. It really is, I think, because you say that 4-point gap. If they were to win it, Arsenal, all of a sudden it puts Tottenham under massive pressure. So I think in general, I think we're looking at this game potentially being one of the biggest games this season. I think certainly when you're looking at Champions League places and what's at stake, and given the fact is that over the years Arsene Wenger has prided himself on Champions League finishes. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this game. I think it'll be a cracker this Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, it'll be great as well just for the neutral, because the title race is over. The relegation battle is already shaping up to something great. And now the top 4 race could, as you say, if Arsenal win, shape up to something brilliant as well. Just another point on that in terms of Arsenal. Like, I think the reason why they descended from title challengers to top 4 contenders was because of the defence. And they've now gone from top 4 challengers to top 6 challengers because their attack was letting them down. But you look at Aubameyang, and the first thing I'd noticed when I just saw him was just the sheer pace that he's got. That breakaway goal they scored against Everton last weekend, and that speed and attack. I know Amy Lawrence has written extensively about it last weekend, just about that added pace and how important that was to the Invincibles team. And finding that added speed and attack is going to be so important for Arsenal to start climbing that ladder again and getting back to being a regular in the top 4.
Yeah, I've not read that. It's actually nice that you've noticed something that happens on the pitch rather than reading the stats sometimes. But I think Aubameyang will make a huge difference to Arsenal. I think he will. I'd certainly question the judgment of signing Lacazette last summer if Aubameyang. Sometimes a player comes up late notice and you have to make that signing, but it's almost as if that money's just been frittered away on Lacazette now, because I just can't see him getting any game time given the way that Arsenal actually do play and the system that they do set up. But I'm interested to see Arsenal long term. I do. I think we're all admirers of how they do play. I'd question Arsenal's discipline over the years. I certainly would question it under Wenger. That's the one thing. I'd question the professionalism on a lot of those players as well that have played for Arsenal over the years. But you always get to this stage where Arsenal, there's two signings gone in there, and you're thinking, yeah, they've got a chance now over the next year. Can they now maintain something? Can they get 2 or 3 more signings in? Can they make themselves solid in midfield? Can they solidify defensively? Because if they do it, Arsenal have got the players to go on and seriously challenge. But I don't know. It's the question marks, and again, I go back to the point: professionalism and the attitude of a lot of those players. And I just don't see a sustained challenge coming in at Arsenal over the next few years. I just don't see it.
Aubameyang is an interesting angle that Owen brings up there. He's 4 from 4 in games against Spurs, which is an interesting enough stat, obviously, from his time at Borussia Dortmund. I was reading that it compares better than the likes of Henry and RVP. Pretty small sample size now, to be fair. But, I mean, is there something in that? You know, he's got good record against Tottenham. It's different systems and it's all of that stuff. But actually, from a confidence point of view, it's pretty good position for him to be in.
Yeah, well, you'd know my goal scoring record, Adrian. I didn't necessarily have any sort of purple patches against any team, so I can't really disclose that. But having spoken to a lot of strikers that would have, they'd have certain records against certain teams, and it happens all of a sudden. It's just they're out against a certain side, and they just feel good in that particular game, and they'll end up excelling and scoring. So I think it does make a difference. I think Aubameyang will fancy it this weekend, given the fact is that yes, he is starting for his new club. It is the huge game, the big derby for them, so he'll be up for it in that respect. But he'll fancy it given his goal scoring record against Spurs and Tottenham themselves. They haven't necessarily across over the last few years been great at Wembley. Arsenal's record at Wembley has actually been brilliant over the last few years, and that's the one thing you maybe can't overlook. That a lot of those players have got experience of going to Wembley, of getting big results in big games. So that's another thing that maybe lead you towards Arsenal. I mean, there's been a lot of suggestion over the last week or so that I'm actually anti-Spurs, which clearly I'm not. I don't know where the hell this suggestion has come from. I love Spurs. It's a great club, Spurs. But I don't know. I'm just looking forward to this game. I think there's many things within this game I think I'm looking forward to seeing. I don't necessarily. I just something in me that actually fancies Arsenal to get something out of it. I'm not saying they're going to go and win the game, but I don't know. I just think they've got certain personnel within that side that can hurt Spurs. I think getting Toby Alderweireld back for Tottenham, I think that's a massive thing. I probably expect him to start this weekend, and I think given that Tottenham will have a full strength side out, resting Ali, Ericsson, and Kane midweek, I think that's another thing that's within this game that'll play into. That'll help Spurs. But I just don't know. I just see Arsenal getting something from this game. Yeah.
Are English players, as Arsene Wenger puts it, the masters of diving now, or is this just a little bit of needle ahead of the game at the weekend?
Well, you're seeing it more and more. It's certainly come into the English game over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, I suppose, you were seeing those great Arsenal sides, and you were seeing Robert Perez that was bringing a bit of diving into the game. You were seeing him going down expertly. You're seeing English players now. British players in general, they're following that same sort of mould that, any sort of contact, or not even contact at times, is kind of trying to ride tackles, kicking the leg into an opponent like Perez used to do, kicking the leg into the floor and going over. So, you know what? I think the substance of that argument, I think there is from Wenger.
Is Dele Alli the chief culprit when it comes to diving?
No, definitely. He is. He does have to be careful, Dele Alli. He's been scrutinised for many things off and on the pitch in recent weeks. But I think in general, Ali is a major culprit of it. But again, it's not just Ali. You see many British players now over the last few years that any sort of contacts are going over.
Couple of things before we leave you, Kev. You're on your tour. You're on your your travels again this weekend.
Yes, I am at Man City Leicester tomorrow. Yes, and then I'm heading over to Galway on Sunday for the Galway Mayo game. Yeah,
it was more that really that I was talking about. You've been a busy man. I don't know if you can see that on your screen.
No, I can't see anything on my screen.
So what we have here is a picture of you. This is Clonus, right? This is off the ball Shane Hannon, who's tweeted a picture of the Anglo-Celt, I think, Owen, is it? The Northern Standard, I've been told. So this is the picture of you, Kev, which I'm sure you're aware of. The entire rest of the fans in your friends around you there in the stand at St Turnix Park looking at the game, and you staring at the camera. Did you spend all your time looking at the camera, or did you watch any of the game?
I'm not actually staring at the camera. If anyone would notice it properly, everyone's looking in the same direction as me, actually, Adrian. So
no, your friends around you are all looking at the game, Kev.
Yeah, exactly what I'm doing. So, I didn't notice any camera, actually, Adrian. Again, if you study it properly, you'll probably see that everyone's looking in the same direction, as I said before. But
I'm on Kev's side on this one.
Yeah, sometimes, Adrian, you see what you want to see.
All the time, Kev. That's absolutely all the time. Yeah. So, listen.
We actually, can we just say we had this conversation last night, and did you bet me €20 that everyone wasn't looking in my direction?
No, I did not bet you €20.
Yeah, I think you did, Adrian. I think
€5, Kev, and I'm sticking by my guns as well, by the way.
Was it €5? So you owe me €5, yeah.
Yeah, well, look, it looks like the night that you had. That's I'm not surprised that you can't remember that. Here, listen, I've been looking up. I've been on airlingus.com, right? There's a flight at 10 a.m. and there's a flight then at 12:15.
Yeah, I'll miss the 10 a.m. flight, so I'll have to try to speak to my friends at Aer Lingus. And
your friends at Aer Lingus, have you?
No, I'll go and speak to them. I'll go
friends
speak
everywhere,
nicely.
Kev, you have.
Is that right?
That's the 6:40. Right? There we are. So flight at 10 o'clock, that'll get you in at 11:10. It's going to set you back €103. You can leave then at 12:15 if you want.
There's only one seat left in that 10 o'clock.
Only one seat left there at that price, though.
Oh no, he'll go for the 3:11.
113 quid. I'm presuming you'll be away at 12:15, will you?
Probably. This time now, it's what is it? 9:10. I'll never make that 10 o'clock one now. So I'm going to have to. I'll get myself up and get myself ready to go. 12:15 it is, I think.
Kev, you're a beauty. Thanks for taking the call.
Good man. Take it easy.
Good man. Lads. Take it easy. Kevin Kilbane there, live from his study room and not his kitchen in Manchester, as we had kind of expected before we chatted to him. There we go.
But it's sleuthing going on. He is right though. He's not looking at the camera. Yeah. Looking to the right of camera, but sure, look, we can bring up inaccuracies whenever it suits you.
We had a couple of comments on that actually. Column on Facebook, I can't remember the rest of it, was asking me to name and shame. We'd spoken about prima donnas a bit earlier in the show, and I'd say that Warren Gatland wasn't one of the prima donnas. Colin McDonald was asking me to name the prima donnas that we've had over. I mean, I couldn't possibly do that.
But you're going to.
I mean, you know, we had a
who was the
very
closest
famous
person to being a prima donna? He's not a prima donna. Let's just say that there's no such thing as a prima donna. But who would be the closest person?
I would say that we had a high-profile goalkeeper over at a roadshow around the playoffs. So that would have been, was that October?
October, November, yeah.
So that
the
roadshow
playoffs, was it?
Yeah, that roadshow.
So it could have been a Danish.
No, I'm saying it was that roadshow.
Okay, yeah.
One of the guests at that roadshow.
No, I couldn't.
So that just leaves
name
the
any
option.
Danish goalkeepers.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying one of the guests at that roadshow.
But it was before the Denmark football game.
Luke McGuinness on Facebook also. You'd have had to have been around about an hour ago to get this reference. But beavers in the desert, he says. 2 laughing faces.
Yeah, that was stupid by me. I'm not going to lie. That was definitely the stupidest thing I've ever said. But I've set myself a a high bar. Wow. Okay, that's the second worst thing I've said today. The beavers.
It's 9:10 on this Friday morning, and we are delighted to have you with us, it turns out. And we're going to bring you the Barometer now. It's the highlight of all our weeks, and we've put a huge amount of effort into it this week. I got very excited about it because I found the number 1 on this list earlier in the week, and it inspired me to fill out the rest of the list. So we'll get to number 1 in a minute. But it's a reverse take through this week on the Barometer, the 5 through to 1 reasons that you really need to be a sports fan this week.
Yeah, you put a lot of work into this. You said we put a lot of work into this.
Oh no,
it's all you.
Yeah,
it's all you. Yeah,
that's fair enough.
We're not involved.
You're disassociating yourself before we get going, and if it's good, then you can claim a bit of ownership of it. I think that's kind of where we're going. Right, in at number 5 on the Barometer this week, it's a hat tip to the Las Vegas Lights, who are a team who are about to come into Division 2 of the MLS. I think roughly that's the sort of space we're in. Let's give a bit of context to it. Watch this.
We are announcing today a unique, first of its kind in professional sports history, player incentive. Every time the Lights win at Cashman Field, not just win, but they win, we win, with 3 or more goals scored by our team. If we win and we score 3 or more goals, we are committed to paying each player on the field $100 in poker chips from the Plaza Hotel. This is a commitment to win.
Why are they in the robes, by the way?
That's what I want to know.
I watched the video during the week and I thought, this is going to be massive. They're probably going to give everybody who goes to the game a $10,000 free bet. Mm-hmm. No, we're going to give each player a €100 free bet.
Only if they score 3 goals in a home game.
That is ridiculous. That guy's way, way, way too excited. And they also revealed their jersey during the week. I think we can take a look at that now. I mean, it's pretty special. They're Las Vegas, inspired by being in Las Vegas. We don't do ordinary, it says in the caption there. Maybe, lads, you should think about doing a bit of ordinary.
Was that what was under the bathrobes? They just kind of like had a quick reveal of the new Las Vegas Lights jersey.
In my mind, there was nothing under the bathrobe, so if that's going to be the jersey, then, I mean, I'm all up on that. Right, in at number 4 on the Barometer this week, we're going to stick with US sport, and this was the aforementioned a little bit earlier in the show, Philadelphia Eagles, many of whom have decided not to turn up to the White House, as has been tradition since Ronald Reagan first decreed that Eagles players should, who are Super Bowl champions, should turn up at the White House for a reception with the president. So plenty of them are not going to turn up. They've opted out, and there's some great stories reading through this over the last 24 hours. Great stories of players who've decided not to do it, including Captain Malcolm Jenkins, who talks about creating positive change in communities. Defensive end Chris Long, who remarkably donated his entire salary for the season to charity. His entire season salary. That's incredible. And wide receiver Torrey Smith, who says he didn't want to go to a party that was hosted by a sexist. What is this beautiful birth of a thing? It's brilliant.
Yeah, well, you know, if the fans are absolutely manic and don't do themselves any favours, well, the players certainly have with that sort of behaviour.
Yeah.
It's great to see, to be fair.
Sport has a conscience.
Yeah.
It turns out. And I'm all for it.
To be fair, like, in fairness to the NFL, we give it a bad rap rightly a lot of the time, but like, you look at JJ Watt before the start of the season and the amount of money he raised after Hurricane Irma and the disaster that caused to Houston, to do that for his own home community. And Chris Long as well is another great example of the citizens that exist in the NFL.
His entire season's salary.
Fantastic.
That's incredible. Fly Eagles Fly is the hashtag, and I suggest we all get behind it. Inner number 3 on the Barometer this week. We're off to Pyeongchang for the start of the Winter Olympics. That kicks off today, and the opening ceremony as well. Always pretty interesting, these opening ceremonies on, as I'm sure they isn't lost on you, somebody who's mad into their snowboarding commentary teams. But a little bit of a headache for organisers in Pyeongchang this week, where the American Vice President Mike Pence, who's in town to represent the great US, has been seated, unfortunately, just a couple of seats along from the sister of the ruler of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. This is Miss Kim Yo-jong, seated metres away apparently at the opening ceremony today. The sister of Kim Jong-un, and she's also, it turns out, the head of the propaganda department of North Korea.
They don't have a propaganda department.
Propaganda department. Communications department, I think we'd probably call it.
Communications department.
But propaganda department is how it's been worded here. And blacklisted as well, she is under US sanctions. I mean, I think that's not for anything particular other than being, I'm the sister of this guy, so I'm going to be blacklisted.
What does being blacklisted mean? You know the way you get blacklisted on Twitter and you get
I presume
a ban
it means
for a
that
day.
you can't come to the US and they're not going to endorse you anytime soon. I mean, you know, I think that they're only going to be seated meters apart, but I think Mike Pence and Miss Jong could possibly, they've got a lot of common ground. They both work for megalomaniacs with bad hair. I think they could sort of, you know, find some common ground there today.
They clearly both enjoy winter sports greatly.
Peace could break out. Yeah, that's definitely what's going on there. Inner number 2 this week is VAR. I've been sort of saying over the last few weeks what a big fan I am of VAR, and we need to give it a chance, and it's going to have a few blips over the first few weeks, which turns out it's had. But I'm a big fan of it, and check this out. It's from a game in Eastern Europe, and you know, there was a question about offside in this game. And so the referee decided, you know what, there's only one way to decide this. We're going to go to VAR, and the video is going to prove this one way or the other, so you can check that out, I think. Yeah, so let's go to VAR on. Let's get a clear shot on if this is offside or not offside. Yeah, there's the camera position. That'll tell us now. 1 second, here we go. Okay, ref, stand by. Decision incoming. Oh, hang on, but hang on about. Oh, ruined by a giant flag. I mean, I think the lesson here is if your team is shit and you're going to a team that's a little bit better, you can position yourself in front of the TV tower with a giant flag. Probably going to give your side a bit of a dig out.
And then, like, traipse down to the other end of the pitch for the second half with your massive flag just to stop their offensive goal.
Inner number 1 of the Barometer this week, and the entire inspiration for even doing the Barometer this Friday morning. I'm going to let these pictures speak a little bit for themselves, but it is in relation to the Six Nations. This is from Wales Online. I mean, headline of the year, possibly. A rugby fan pooed on a pub table in front of everyone after Wales beat Scotland in the Six Nations. So, I mean, look, we've all been there, Owen. You know, you've had a few pints and you've got a little bit excited. And what are you going to do? But hop up on the table and take a poo. Working in a pub, says I think this was the landlady's quote, you have to clean things up in the toilet from time to time, but not this. My dog is better behaved.
You know,
I mean, you know, it just puts anybody who's heading along to the pub this weekend to watch Ireland v Italy, it's a lesson to everybody. You know, when you're saying to the wife as you're walking out the door, listen, love, I'm just heading down to I'm just pooping out to grab a pint. You know what I mean? On best behaviour, if you wouldn't mind. I think we've got the apology letter as well from the culprit here. We can take a little look at that there. You know, look, he's let his family down. He's let everybody down. He's very sorry, and he's embarrassed for what he did. It affected his wife, his family, and his friends. And I mean, I'm glad that he pointed out that the blame lies solely with himself, as opposed to with somebody else. He's offered to come in and clean up the place and make a donation to charity and all of that kind of stuff that you do after taking a dump on a
strikes
pub
me as a
table.
good guy. A guy we should probably get on the show at some point or another. If maybe he can present a Barometer next week.
I'm all for that. That is the Barometer this week. I think that was just deserving of the number 1 spot on. Poo on the table.
Yes, definitely deserving of the number 1 spot. And to say I enjoyed it is a massive overstatement.
I mean, it could have been number 2, obviously.
Yes, Adrian, with an absolute zinger right there to end the show with. Delighted I hung around for this.
It is 9:15 on this Friday morning. That is the Barometer for the week, and it's almost it from us for the minute, but we want to give you a little bit of a flavour of a preview as well of the game Ireland-Italy tomorrow. This is Oisín, who caught up with Dan Leavy, and I think we're going to leave you with this, Tommy, if that's correct. Owen, thanks a million.
No, thank you.
Enjoy your weekend. Behave yourselves, if you wouldn't mind, when you're in a scheme, one pub or two pubs or whatever. Just please don't be abusing the opposition.
Reading Kavanagh all afternoon, that's all we're going to be doing.
Donegal Ryan is going to be on Off the Ball on the radio tonight. A busy Premier League Live as well on Today FM. A double header, in fact, of games on Today FM this weekend. You can check out the first game on todayfm.com. That's the early game as well. And then the later game will be on the radio from 2 o'clock, as well as Scrum Saturday, where Fiona Coughlin is going to be joining Neil Tracy from 1 o'clock on Today FM. And Nick Popplewell as well, a real character of rugby and a guy we know well, is going to be previewing the weekend's action. And now That's What I Call Sport will be on 98 FM from 9 a.m. on Sunday morning. And a reminder as well that we're back at the Aviva Fan Studio. That is tomorrow for round 2 of the NatWest Six Nations Championship. We have a brilliant panel. Donegal Ryan's going to be there, Fiona Steed is going to be there, and Mike McCarthy as well. We want you to join us. You can check out our post on Facebook. It was put up yesterday. We're looking for you to like it and to tag a mate and to be able to chance to come and join us and have a proper knees up with some proper rugby legends. So we are going to play you out with some Dan Leavy. Oisín was out and about this week to catch up with the Ireland back row, who'll make his first Six Nations start tomorrow against Italy. He asked him about what the fans can expect tomorrow in terms of the style of rugby. But before all of that, first a little bit about his brilliant run of form under Leo Cullen at Leinster. Good morning.
You've had an absolutely wonderful season. Talk to us about where your form has come from, how you've got to this level, how you hope to keep it going.
Yeah, it's been kind of up and down. I got injured quite early on in the season. Came back, played a few games, and right before the November, I had a little bit of hamstring trouble and missed the whole November series. But I've got back into the swing of things well, and I've had a few pretty solid performances over the Christmas period, and I find myself in a pretty good position now. So yeah, it's just hard work, working a lot one-on-one with the coaches, and getting feedback and trying to improve little 1%ers every day, and it's starting to pay off.
And finally from me, this week against Italy at home, do you expect it to be a bit different to last week's kind of really attritional warfare against France? Do you expect to try and get the ball going a bit quicker? What will be the differences, do you think?
I don't think it's going to be different in the fact that it's going to be hugely attritional as well. I think Italy are a serious outfit, and the scoreline doesn't really reflect how the game went against England. England had 1 or 2 breakaway tries, and Italy also had one called back for a forward pass. So I think it is going to be a seriously tough test, and it's not one we're going to overlook. And so it's all hands on deck for Saturday.